while I'm sad. You've been out all night, know you've been bad. Don't tell me different, know it's a lie. Come to me, honey, see how I cry.
Welcome to the Recovery Show, Bernie Z. That's me. I want to start with a discussion on the side of step one that doesn't have the addict as the focus, but has the family members and the people around them, the support group, around the support network around them. And we're going to start with the serenity prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Now, that comes into play not only for the addict, but for the person who is a support person for that. The person that's the husband, the wife, the son, the daughter, the grandparents, the co-workers, the friends, everybody in there. Because not only does the addict have to admit they have a problem, but when the addict comes to you and says, I have a problem, that's hard for us to admit if we're not the addict. For me, I'm the addict. I learned that I had a problem, and I will attach a link below for the first video on this that talks about the addict aspect of it. But a lot of times, with a compulsive gambler, with overeaters and that kind of stuff, family members look at it and they say, it's not a big deal. Some might say, well, they deserve it because they've had a tough week, or they work hard for their money. Others are not going to be as understanding as that, but they are going to be thinking about, well, they don't really have a problem. And that's the difficult thing, is when an addict who knows they have a problem addresses it, mentions it to family members and stuff, and it's swept under the rug. It's allowed to be enabled. And that's something, it's not the family member, anybody's fault as far as the people that are not the addict. The addict takes responsibility for their own actions. That's what they can change. The only thing that a person around that addict can change is their perspective on the addict. And it doesn't have to be going from caring so much that they ignore the problem to caring so much that they ignore the addict until they come clean. What it needs to be, or what would be good, is seeing the addict there and saying, I love you, I care about you, I'm here for you, but I'm not going to enable you. I'm not going to give you a loan for your addiction. And when somebody that's an addict finally admits that they have a problem, and they come to you, you say, okay, let's work together on it. So that's where we're at with that. What is it that support people often see? They might see a person who isn't admitting their addiction, and when they finally do, they're skeptical. And that's good. Be skeptical in the beginning, but don't be so skeptical that you write them off. Be skeptical because in the beginning it's hard not only to maintain sobriety from your addiction, but to admit that you're powerless over it. A lot of people will try to find a way to gain strength through it. They'll say, I can beat this on my own. And they won't reach out for help. They'll admit they have a problem. They'll go to the meetings now and then, but they'll go to the meetings and go through the motions. And that sometimes is because they're court ordered. That'll sometimes be because somebody said, it's that or we're done, which initially that's what happened with me. Is I was told, you'll go to the meetings or you're done. And over time I realized I was done anyway, because one of the things that's got to be consistent with recovery is that when a situation comes to the point where you say, I'm going to do something, you need to do it. And that goes both ways. That goes for the person in recovery and the person that's supportive of them. And what happened with me is that I heard for months that they were through with me. My spouse said, "I'm through with you." And I spent times when I was out of the house and spent time in my car for an overnight or something like that. And over time, that became something where I said, well, let's see, I'm being kicked out. I'm being told I don't have any guts to stand up to anything. And they're telling me that the option is separation, divorce, that kind of thing. And I finally came to the conclusion that they were threatening that, whether they realized it or not, and I needed to take action. So I took action because there was, at the end, there was a separation, and I simply said, I can't do this anymore. Now that was well into my recovery process, but I finally came to the conclusion that I needed to commit to taking action. It was continually a threat hanging over my head for the first few years of my recovery, and I finally said, I can't have another threat hanging over my head. Those kind of things tend to feed the addiction, the anxiety, the struggles and stuff. So what I did is I filed for divorce, and by the end of 2011, which, as many of you know, since I stopped in 2007, 4 years into my addiction, I made the step complete. I took the steps to say, okay, you've threatened it, but you've never followed through, and you've told me I can't follow through anything. So I followed through. And it was probably one of the better things I did, because I finally said, I can be in recovery and I can stand up for myself. I can admit that I have a problem, but I can also see something as a threat or a promise or a thing hanging over my head and simply say, it's time to get rid of that thing hanging over my head and make it a reality. And in 2013, I remarried to a wonderful young lady who is now my wife and has been for 3 years. Our relationship is, she knows I'm an addict, and she does everything she can to support it. As a result, I wrote books. I started doing things like this, where I'm sharing my addiction with others, and I'm sharing that process. And that's something for support people too. They need to understand that if you make a threat or a promise or a commitment to an action, follow through. But also be prepared for the consequences upon you. Because when I filed for divorce, one of the consequences for me was my sons were not as eager to spend time with me. They saw a bigger problem. They didn't really resent me, but they were happy that I followed through. At least one of them was happy I followed through. The other one, I think, also was happy I followed through. But it showed them that I could stand my ground. For a person that is a support person to that addict, be willing to stand your ground. Know that you're powerless over what that addict does. But if you say you're going to do something, do it. Because, well, that's going to be hard. It is going to have a profound effect on both you and the addict. So that's where your part in the admitting we're powerless over the addiction was in, and that life has become unmanageable. You make it manageable for you. You don't let the addict drag you down, and you work on recovery from the damage that was done. That doesn't mean that everybody's going to get divorced or anything like that. It means you decide what you're going to do and you do it.
While I'm sad, you've been out all night, know you've been bad. Don't tell me different, know it's a lie. Come to me, honey, see how I cry.